Thank you everyone for coming. I'll just start with the college's land acknowledgement. Elizabethtown College recognizes and respects the fact that our institution is located on the Susquehannock people's ancestral homeland. While there is currently no Susquehannock community, we recognize the historical and cultural significance of this land. As an institution of higher education, we endeavor to honor and respect the indigenous people who once inhabited this territory. As an institution that strives to foster the values of human dignity and social justice, we extend our gratitude to the indigenous communities that have cared for this land for generations. We are committed to recognizing and learning from your contributions and history, which are integral to our collective narrative. So, as I mentioned, welcome. I really appreciate everyone coming tonight. We are hearing tonight researching and recording BIPOC student history at Elizabethtown College. My name is Rachel Grove Rohrbaugh, and I'm the archivist here in the High Library. This evening, two students, Kalen, Tendo, and Jordyn, Dutko, will share their recent research on the history of students of color at Elizabethtown College, research showcased in the spring Idea Lab exhibit, preserving the stories of Etown students and alumni of color. So just right over behind you in the Idea Lab. And I really encourage everyone to visit the exhibit, either tonight or sometime between now and when it goes down at the end in mid-May. This exhibition includes oral history interviews, as well as information about early BIPOC alumni, influential faculty and staff, student clubs, activism, and much more. The exhibition also features the work of the Elizabethtown College Church of the Brethren Racial Justice Working Group, including research on Elizabethtown's history as a sundown town that used various methods, including racial covenants, to keep Blacks from living here in the first half of the 20th century. And as I mentioned earlier, it is on through May. The exact date of it is on is through May 16th. So first, Jordyn, Dutko's talk this evening will focus on her research on the lives of early BIPOC students, faculty, and staff. Kalen will then share clips and observations from our oral history interviews with alumni of color. Kalen Tendo is a sophomore legal studies major. He completed a SCART project in the Hess Archives in the summer of 2024 and continues to work in the Hess Archives. Jordyn Dutko is a junior history and political science major and is minoring in public heritage studies and international studies. Dutko joined the project in fall 2024 as the Young Center's Ziegler Fellow and has continued to work on the project this semester in the archives. Our project was made possible with support from the High Library, the Young Center for Anabaptist and Pietist Studies, the Office of Civil Rights, Opportunity and Access, as well as the Office of Alumni Relations. Thank you to the faculty and staff in these offices for everything you have done to make this work possible. Thank you also to the alumni who have been willing to share their stories, including Rosalind Griffin, 61, Paul Rice, 55, David Jackson, 73, Albert Granger, 83, Kenneth Tendo, 94, Corey Reed, 04, Aaron Blanding, 09, and Adrian McClellan, 11. Please be aware that this presentation includes a discussion of racist incidents and examples of racial slurs. Elizabethtown College does not endorse this content, but is committed to preserving the full historical record with the hope that we can learn from past injustices and engage in more truthful conversations about history. So I will introduce first to come on up, Jordyn Dutko.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. So, as Rachel mentioned, most of my research revolved around the early students, alumni, faculty, and staff of color here at Etown. So with that, we'll get right into it, starting with Domingo Dickett. He came from the Philippines, and he was the first student of color to attend Elizabethtown College in 1905. However, he was not the college's first international student. John Barbarian, an Armenian from Turkey, also attended during the same year. He later lived and worked in Elizabethtown, and his son, Dr. Harry Barbarian, graduated from here in 1942. Dickett was initially enrolled as a student at the St. Francis Vocational School for Boys in Eddington, Pennsylvania. His former teacher from the Philippines tried to get him to transfer to the Carlisle Indian School, but he never actually enrolled there. With the help of that teacher, he got into Elizabethtown College and attended during the 1905-1906 academic year. He played on the college's first baseball team and worked as a mail carrier, laborer, and farmhand to earn money. At that time, it was typical for students to attend the college for only a year or two before obtaining a job. So he returned to the Philippines in 1907, where he worked as assistant auditor of the Philippine National Bank and served as secretary-treasurer of the Philippine Board of Accountancy. Next, we have Charles Jenkins, class of 1930, and Jenkins was the first African-American student and person of color to graduate from Elizabethtown College. Before his time at Etown, he initially graduated from the Virginia Theological Seminary and conducted additional theological work at the University of Chicago School of Divinity. He began his ministry at the First Baptist Church in Pulaski, Virginia. While a student here, he served as pastor of the Second Baptist Church of Harrisburg. At the time of his graduation, he was 41 years old and married with 2 children. After graduation, he left for a church in Pittsburgh, then in 1936 came to the Second Baptist Church of Columbus, Ohio, one of the oldest and most influential Black Baptist churches in the state. He served as pastor there until 1971 and had a major impact on that church and its congregation. According to the church records, membership tripled under his leadership, and he initiated various improvement projects on the church building. He was active in various local, state, and national organizations as a member of the Ohio Baptist Convention, the Frontiers, the Bull, the Spring Street YMCA Board, and the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority Board during the later part of his life. He was also a distinguished academic, awarded honorary doctorate degrees from 3 schools, including Elizabethtown College in 1955. Next, we have William Miller Barber, class of 1932, and Barber was a prominent civil rights pioneer. He was popular during his time at Etown and was involved in numerous sports and clubs, including the short-lived football team, basketball team, debating team, and yearbook staff. He graduated with a degree in education and went on to pursue a master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania, where he tirelessly worked to end gang violence and promote the arts among African American students. He held a career in social work during the 1940s, which inspired him to get involved in civil rights organizing with the National Urban League. He was promoted to director of the Urban League in Denver, Colorado, and further promoted to head of the Urban League's Western region in Pasadena, California. His work primarily highlighted racial and ethnic discrimination in housing and employment long before such ideas became widespread. These ideas, in turn, went on to become the major ideological foundations behind the civil rights movement in the 1960s. His writings are cited in many academic works and books related to civil rights and organizing, and he was truly a passionate leader with a commitment to bring about lasting change in the communities he worked with. Next, we have Daniel Scott, also class of 1932, and like Jenkins, he made significant contributions to the Baptist Church during his career. After his graduation, he moved to Chester, Pennsylvania, where he served as pastor of Bethany Baptist Church beginning in 1939. He left a significant impact on that church community, as many of the organizations he founded during his time there still exist today, including the Daniel Chorus, 49ers Club, Christian Workers Club, and President's Council. He also helped expand the church's property and presence in the area. Next, we have Sally Johnson on the left and Mildred Holloway on the right, both class of 1954. And these women were the first women of color to graduate from Elizabethtown College. They transferred here during their junior year from Piney Woods Junior College in Piney Woods, Mississippi. Piney Woods Junior College, now known as the Piney Woods School, was founded in 1909 to provide affordable higher education to African American students. Currently, it serves grades 9 to 12 and is the oldest of just 4 remaining historically Black boarding schools in the United States. In our interview with Paul Rice, 55, we learned that college president A.J. Bacher may have had connections to Piney Woods through the Church of the Brethren, which could have been how Holloway and Johnson learned about Etown. Both women were popular students who were active around campus. They ran a campus chess fund drive that benefited the World Student Service Fund and Piney Woods Junior College in 1953, were saxophone players in the college band, and Johnson was elected May Queen by her peers in 1954. Holloway returned to work at the Piney Woods School after graduating with a business degree, then moved to Riverside, California, where she was employed by the County Board of Education as a budget and fiscal services manager. Additionally, in 1956, 2 years after their graduation, Isaiah Ebersol Oberholzer, a key figure within the Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren community, served at the Pineywood School. Next, we will transition over to highlighting some of the early influential faculty and staff members at Etown. And we'll start off with John Jasper Sperling, who was the first faculty member of color here at Etown. He served as an assistant professor of sociology during the 1956-57 academic year. And before accepting his position at Elizabethtown, he worked at Columbia University and Johnson C. Smith University. He was a member of the library faculty committee during his time here and left after only a year to continue his doctorate studies. Robert C. Chung served as an assistant and associate professor of psychology from 1971 to 1981. He previously worked as a psychiatric social worker and junior court counselor before accepting his position at Elizabethtown. He was chair of the psychology department during his time here. He had a strong interest in studying and helping the mentally ill, which he attributed to his assignments before becoming a professor. Maurice Hopi served as an assistant and associate professor of economics from 1981 to 2006, and also served as associate chairperson of the business department during his time here. He was born in Guyana, South America, and came to the United States in 1969 to pursue a teaching career. The story of how he ended up at Elizabethtown is a very interesting one. So, college president at the time, Mark Ebersol, his brother was the vice president of finance at the University of Tennessee, where Hopi was studying and working. So through him, he learned about an open position at Etown, and he applied and got the job. He was known for his interactive teaching style while he was here and encouraging his students to think critically and innovatively, which earned him a great deal of respect from students and faculty alike in the business department. Alberta B. Jack was one of the first women of color employed by the college from 1969 to 1970. She was known to her students as Mrs. Jack and was a counselor in counseling services who many students of color turned to for help during their time here. She was mentioned in the 18 Demands student protests of 1970, where Black students advocated for her to receive a salary increase comparable to that of others in her department. And finally, we have Min Liu, who was the first female faculty member of color in the college's history. She was not hired until 2000, and she served as an assistant professor of sociology and anthropology from 2000 to 2003. While the college has recently made significant strides in terms of hiring women faculty and staff of color, this highlights a long overdue commitment to diversity inclusion in the academic environment at Etown. As a part of the college's 125th anniversary, it's important to uplift these stories and voices to ensure they're not forgotten, because they have left such a tangible and lasting impact on our institution as a whole. We recognize these individuals' contributions and honor them as prominent members of Elizabethtown College's history.
Okay, so the interviews of past students from Etown. So realistically, what I have done so far in the past is I started in 2020 at SCARP, and during this period of time, I was looking into newspapers just to understand how the students of color in Etown basically were treated on the campus, whether or not they felt welcome, whether or not they felt safe on the campus, and whether or not the other students were actually treating them with respect. And during this period, you got some stories from the newspapers, but the newspapers only give you so much information. They don't give you the full story, they don't give you, because it's filtered. And so you got some stuff. We touched upon the 8 demands, which I will go further into later on. But we needed to talk to the students to get that full picture to come out. So we begun doing our interviews. We have interviewed 9 people so far, and we actually uncovered many different stories and different sides of Elizabethtown College through all these people's voices. So one of the first people that we interviewed was Aaron Blanding. He attended school in the 90s, but he graduated in 2009. Now, Aaron Blanding partook in creating and bringing forward a Black student union. Now, on this campus, there was multiple Black student unions that came up and existed and also kind of dissipated and disappeared. And so he wanted to bring it back because he believed that this would bring more Black students together and be able to inform and teach people. Now, during this period of time, it wasn't very easy for him to be able to deal with certain things, and he struggled with a lot. And so in this next clip, he touched upon that.
The experience of starting the Black Student Union?
It was kind of tough. It was, there wasn't really a lot to, it started out with just a few of us in the dorm room, and then we had to go, obviously, to the professors and to the deans and, to finally get it recognized. And they thought it was, at first, they thought it would be exclusionary. And, we ended up having some white members as well. It was like, no, it's not just a Black club. Like, that's not what it is. It's all about, trying to help out the minorities on campus, get used to campus life, and it was hard with, although when we were there, it was like 1,500 students there maybe, but even then, to have 10 of us on campus, it was tough. And then even with the exchange students, I believe your dad was from Cameroon, so there were a couple of Nigerian students, so even that, it wasn't like there was 10 African American students, so they had different cultures and different things as well, so.
What kinds of activities did the Black Student Union plan?
We did dances, we did talent shows, we did trips, like we would take a trip to Lancaster or to Harrisburg and look at, go to the museum or, different things like that. So we did we obviously didn't have any funding, so, anywhere we went, we had to drive, carpool, and do on our own.
And so in this clip, there's a couple of things I already touched upon, so I just want to highlight that. The first thing is that sometimes when people look into this past, and you see different things that come across, you see that some things were hateful, some things were racist, but the thing is, at Etown was a spectrum. It wasn't just all good, it wasn't all bad, but you had multiple different things. And so this kind of showed that there were students that were there to support the students of color who were at Etown, as there were people who were joining these clubs and partaking and actually helping to support what they were doing, there to actually learn, there to be able to appreciate their other fellow students of color. The second thing is that a lot of the students of color, there was two different groups, because you had the international students and then you had the American students. And they had their own separate experiences and their own sets of difficulties and things that they were easier to do than others. And so you see, for some of the African Americans, they had an understanding of racism, whereas some of the international students didn't. So when people were making comments toward them, sometimes for the Americans, it would be a lot more difficult for them to integrate because of these things compared to the international students. So the other thing too is that he touched upon events. So they had events on the campus, and in my thinking, when I was kind of looking at this, I saw in the newspaper that they would present them and they would push them out hoping that they would be able to teach people. So if we're gonna try to test to how the environment and the community was at Elizabethtown in the past, we'll see if people actually come to these events, because if they come to the events, that means they are there to support the people of color, and if they don't, it kind of shows something else. So in this next clip, he kind of talks about the attendance at these events.
The experience of starting the Black Student Union?
It was kind of tough,
Other question would be, what was the turnout like to the events and activities you guys have? Were a lot of students like willing to come to join the events, the dance and talent shows? Did they come out, or was it mostly just your club and the group that you guys already had associated?
No, the dances and the talent shows were, they were always very well attended. Anything else, we had meetings which weren't attended, but again, there were, only 10 of us on campus, and most of the foreign exchange students didn't really participate in that. But again, they have different cultural views and different things like that, so.
And yeah, so this is what we saw so far, was that for some instances, people attended for the entertainment purpose part. So the dances, because that was fun. But when it came down to some of the real things where it needed to talk about serious issues, not every time did the mass population of the students come and join and partake in that. So there were people who did join in the clubs, and there were some, it wasn't a lot. But what we saw was that the community did come out, but they came out for the reasons of the dances, and that was tended to be simply it. Now, in the next clip, something that we were kind of looking at when we were researching the newspapers was, were students of color leaving? Because the thing is that we had alumni, yes, and there was alumni of color, but the thing is that there were students who were coming to the school, but they wouldn't completely finish their time here, and that was because of the fact that they did deal with issues. So due to that, they decided that some of these students left the school, went off to other colleges, some of them might have dropped out. And the thing is what was the reasons behind this? We were trying to find this out because the newspaper wouldn't tell us this, and some of this information wasn't actually presented. So in the next clip, I asked Aaron Blanding about the attendance of some of the students of color, and basically whether or not they were retaining or were a lot of students leaving during the 90s.
You see many students of color leave campus, and if so, why do you think that they left?
Oh yeah, the turnover was pretty high. You know, it wasn't for, like, if you weren't patient, you know, if you didn't have, you know, a high tolerance for some things, you know, some people, you know, someone could ask one person, you know, again, that question was, hey, what do you put in your hair? You know, do you want chicken? You know, they're on the phone calling their parents saying, you know, it's racist up here, I'm leaving. You know, and then they're out. You know, but, you know, you gotta kind of let things run off your back a little bit, you know. And it wasn't for some people, you know, some people, the culture shock was too much. And, you know, you'd see cats come in for a semester and then they're gone, you know, and then, especially if it wasn't an athlete, if, you know, the person wasn't an athlete and on one of the teams, it was a little bit harder for them.
Do you think as an athlete you had more of a community that kept you there, that kept you at Etown?
Definitely. Because, you know, again, being an athlete, you have your guys, you know, you have your guys on your team who are going to have your back, you know, most of the time. So you build friendships and camaraderie and different things like that. So it was easier as an athlete. I don't know if I would have made it if I wasn't an athlete.
That last part is like one of the things that kind of shocked me a little bit, because what that part showed you was that the students had to depend on one another for a support system. They didn't feel like they could depend on the faculty and staff. And the athletes did have it easier because with their people, they created a family, and that was their support system. But for the other students of color, that wasn't provided to them. So they struggled during those periods of time, and the only thing that they thought they could possibly do was leave. And so but as I said, the thing is a spectrum, because there are students that did feel like that, and this was their actual experience at Etown. But in this next clip, you'll see is Albert Granger, a person who did actually enjoy himself during the period. He's actually a board of trustees. He attended the school in 1983, and for him, in fact, his experience wasn't similar to some of the others. He did not experience a lot of racism. He actually believed that he had a lot of support while he was here through the other fellow white students. He felt that he was included, he felt welcomed on the campus. So, as I said, the experience comes down to the individual, but when that experience is entertained by multiple people, because large groups interact with some of these issues, it comes to be that it's, again, not the whole entire environment, but it's still a big norm of that campus. So during his time here, he kind of touches upon something else though, and there's another element that is important when it comes down to understanding like racism in the past, is that you had two different communities that you operated in. You had this one, but you also had the outside Elizabethtown community. And here he speaks about an interesting encounter, and that encounter was with a Klansman.
It's kind of odd is I did go to the flea market downtown in Elizabethtown. They saw the flea market down in the train station.
No.
Yeah, so they saw the flea market. And the KKK had a booth.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, where am I? You know? But,
And this would have been in the early 80s, late 70s?
yes, 79. Remember, I was there from 79 to 82.
That's crazy.
So what did they have? Just like slap it off?
My uncle was president of the NAACP for New York State at one time, but at the time he was regional, so he was in Suffolk County. So I bought a little KKK flag. And you go, where do you get that? And I told him I got it in the school. Why do you give those guys your money?
Oh, yeah, because you bought?
How much was it?
It was only $1. No, it was a little,
Okay.
it was a little disc, metal disc, proud member. I went to the guy, told it to me, hey, how are you?
He didn't even react
You
to
didn't
your
care.
reply?
Just like,
Of course not.
you just probably happy to take your money and last month.
Of course. It was only like $1 or $2,
But that does say something, the fact that that stamp, probably tons of people were walking past and be like, oh yeah, there's.
Look, money drives everything. So you came there with a dollar bill, you take it, you don't care. It's the same commentary, but that's the real reality.
And so, like, what we just seen right now is that, yes, there were racist people in the town or whatnot. He did meet a friendly classman, so that was kind of nice. He was able to purchase something off of it. But, like, during the time here, though, there was kind of this unwritten rule for the students of color. Now, it was that the fact that they couldn't go into the town after dark. And even sometimes, even during the day, they weren't welcome. And that was just because of the fact that the townspeople weren't as welcoming as the Elizabethtown community towards having students of color. Some of them were actually against this idea completely. But the odd thing is that sometimes they were allowing it just because of the fact that they went to Elizabethtown College. So some students would enter into like the stores that were in the town, and before that person of color would enter, they would specifically ask them, where are you from? Are you part of the college? And the moment they said that they were part of the college, they kind of seemed to step back, which was a little bit odd to me because was there some type of understanding that if you were attending Elizabethtown College and you were a student of color, you would be allowed to be able to shop there? But what would happen if you weren't from Elizabethtown College? We never were able to uncover that, but there could have been a different rule for that aspect. So it just kind of seemed that when they came here, it wasn't even just the fact that they were having a full culture shock, but they had two separate culture shocks because they had one from the townspeople and they had the one on the college campus. So the next person is Rosalind Griffin. So she attended the school in 1861. And during her time here, she kind of shares her, 1961. And she shares her perspective on how she dealt with the things I heard. Because the thing is that for her, she did a lot of work with going back and forth with the faculty. She did a lot of things where she noticed that certain norms were kind of being apparent onto the campus, such as there was another unwritten rule that basically if you were a black woman, you had to be roomed with another black woman. And this kind of became an issue for them because they had other friends and they wanted to be able to go out and be able to room with other people. They brought it to the dean and they asked the dean, would I be able to room with this person? And the dean kind of, this is like paraphrased, but basically was saying that this is not going to happen. We're not going to let this slide. You know that this is going to be the person you're with and you're not allowed to have anybody else. So this was some of these understandings of certain norms that were applying during this time at Elizabethtown College during this period. And she kind of goes back into trying to find different ways to break the norms and basically change it up a bit. So in this next clip, she talks about one of her attempts.
Other incidents, including our informal pushback, was in the dining room. Sit with us. Now, some of them would sit with us just out of the fact we know you, etc., etc. But that was something that was obvious that the students would not, as I would say now to somebody, is it okay? Now I'll have, a white person who will say, if I'm sitting alone or if I'm with friends, will say, is it okay if I sit with you? But then that was our little protest. Once, in a distance, I heard, and I know who the person was, male, who say, spud a nigger. Just ignored it.
And so what we see in this clip right here was, again, another sentiment from one of the students. And the thing is that something that she pushed upon later in her interview is that she believed that Elizabethtown College welcomed students, but they were not welcoming to the students. as they wanted students to come up to the campus and they would bring them and they would incentivize them to come here and say that you want here, you belong here. But the moment that they came here, they didn't feel like they belonged because there were people who were not really out there opening up to be able to interact with some of them. They kind of just had to stick with their own groups, they had to stick with their own people because that was the only way that they could realistically feel safe on the campus. So the next person is David Jackson. Now, David Jackson graduated in '73, and during his period of time, so as I spoke about earlier, there was a spectrum. Now, he was on the other end of the spectrum, and the reason why I state this is because his time, he dealt with a lot. And what I meant by that is a lot of racist comments, a lot of racial issues during his period of time. He had a difficult time at the school. And the thing is, it wasn't just coming from the students alone, it also came from some of the faculty members. Because some of the faculty members weren't as supportive with him and during his journey here at Elizabethtown College. So in this next clip, he speaks about his encounter with one of the staff members.
My time there was a nightmare, literally, because it was my first exposure to racism, and it was abundant and constant, consistent, and never ending.
What was one of the worst experiences that you dealt with through racism while you were on campus?
Well, I had decided that I would not be numbered among, there were only a handful of us, black students there. I would decided that I would at least do something to elevate the focus on racism. So I began the withdrawal process. And at that time, you had to sit with this one, this dean, and that one, and the other one, to explain the reason for your withdrawal. And that gave me the opportunity to introduce the concept of racism and the impact that it was having on students who were not white. Well, after I completed the barrage of sessions with those individuals, ultimately I sat with the president of the school. And it was he, upon the completion of our session, it was he who contacted the monitor of the residence home where I was and asked him if he would talk to me and try to convince me not to withdraw. Well, he made the mistake of not telling this guy, who of course was white, my rationale for withdrawing. So he arrived at his own conclusion. Because I was black, he decided that it must have been that I was having academic difficulty. And so that was how he made an approach to me. You don't think you could manage a D average for the semester? Well, it was then my privilege to report to him that I was on the dean's list. I had a 3.9 grade point average. And it was that revelation that turned him all kinds of shades of red, because he was convinced that my difficulty had to have been a lack of academic prowess.
So ultimately, you did decide to stay at Etown?
Ultimately, yes. Well, I never had any intention of withdrawing. But I went through the process because it gave me an opportunity to talk about racism.
So you see, when it comes down to that support, kind of coming down to be able to talk to like faculty members, you have to basically fight and go through the whole entire withdrawal process to be able to get your voice heard, because the newspapers were only doing a little bit of a job, but it wasn't enough. And this is what he thought was necessary, because the thing that he was battling during that period of time was ignorance, and that was the one thing I could say populated the campus. Because the thing is that in this next clip that you're about to see is that what he also dealt with, it was racial comment and people asking stupid questions and things of that nature. Now, some of the questions not every single time were ones that came from a racist background and something that they were doing it hatefully. Some people just really didn't know. Because the thing is, at that campus, a lot of people almost actually never even saw black people before. So sometimes it was their first experience seeing people of color. But again, you also still dealt with those nasty comments. So this next clip, that's what you're about to see him dropping like that.
My time there was.
And so when you say racism, like, what were the different aspects of racism that you saw? Like, was it like they would yell things at you, would they like harass you, maybe like try and beat people up? So what were the things that you saw that were racist that the Etown students were doing?
I don't recall having experienced or witnessed anything physically oriented. But there were always comments. Most of it was verbal. There were, no, you would not know. There was a time in this country where there was a vast array of stereotypes about black people, one of which was that we were descendants from monkeys. And so oftentimes they would ask, where do you hide your tail? Is it true? They would ask the women, is it true that you have a switchblade in your bra? That kind of thing.
And this type of issue seemed to be quite prevalent, and I was just wondering when I listened to stuff, what made them feel so confident enough to come up to people and say that? Because he isn't the only person who experienced that. Aaron Bynum also touched upon that earlier too as well. He and multiple other students experienced these things on often occasions. So it really kind of came down to questioning is, why is it that they felt comfortable continuously doing these things all throughout every single year that this person was attending the school? And you see, some of the black students came together to create a group to be able to ask for certain things that they believed that would be able to support the black students. So they created the 18 demands. So that was what touched upon by Jordyn earlier. And the 18 demands were things that the black students believed would be able to help them push forward, persevere, and be able to bring more students of color onto the campus. They believed it would create better support for them. And so David Jackson was one of these students who came together to be able to push these incentives forward, to be able to help promote general wealth for the black people. So in this next clip, he touches upon that and the campus community's reaction from them trying to do this.
So speaking on encouraging, what encouraged you guys to formulate 18 demands and then be able to push them forward and feel confident enough to be able to hopefully get it done?
Well, this is very interesting. I invited the black students to my room one evening to discuss racism. And by the time, the session concluded, the word had spread all over campus that we were going to burn down the campus. All over the campus. We were going to burn it down. That's the kind of ridiculous stereotyping that obtained there. And it was nonstop, as I said earlier. was blatant, bold, brazen.
When the faculty heard that, so did they do any follow up on you guys? Did they bring you guys' name for like questioning? And that was the rumor that's been spread.
The interesting thing is that they arranged the session for the next day, and I remember it as if it were yesterday. We were in a conference room with a long table, and I was the only student that arrived. Everyone else, you know, they were administrators, I guess, maybe faculty. Everyone else was white. And on each end of the table, they had gigantic tape recorders. And so the entire session was recorded. I guess I was supposed to have been intimidated, but I was not. And the prevailing sentiment at the conclusion of this session was, "My, you are very articulate for someone like you."
So, sorry, just not appropriate. What kind of questions were they asking you, do you remember?
Well, they were concerned about black students burning down the campus. So most of the inquisition was in that regard.
Was this before or after the 18 demands that we saw
Before.
later? Before.
So I had a question about the language that was kind of used within what was the writing, because what I saw from the start was that you guys referred to it as expectations, and there were 6 expectations. And you guys specifically declared that you would rather call it expectations and not demands. And then in the next thing, it was changed towards 18 demands. So why did you make that difference? Why did you guys make that change?
Primarily because of the rumors that were spreading. That, and as I said, there were only a handful of black students at that time. But the rumors were that even though we were small in number, we had the means to destroy the campus. And we had every intention to do so.
So do you think that's the reason why, when the school or the president received the demands, that's the reason why they said no to everything on the list?
Well, there was merely no inclination to address the issue of racism in that institution, period. The only reason they were concerned about my pending departure wasn't because they had any affinity toward me as a human being, but because there were only a few black students. At that time, federal funding was contingent, was somehow related to the number of minority students. So that if you lost minority students, you ran the risk of losing federal funding. That was their only concern in that regard.
Did they offer anything to you, like any incentive whatsoever to try and keep you or other black students on campus?
No.
They would risk losing you guys?
No.
So this was a lot, and you can see essentially the way the 8 demands were treated, because some of the 8 demands were asking for more money in scholarships for some of the black students. They were asking for one of the counselors that was black, Mrs. Jackson, she touched upon, to basically bring her back because that was one of their only support systems at their period of time. And so the 80 demands, they sent this out into the newspapers because they were trying to get more people to fight for their cause. And you see, the president did respond back to them because that wasn't the only instance that he did a back and forth with somebody. He made an official letter and sent it out, where basically he's kind of going through those demands and saying which one he felt that should be applied to, which one he didn't feel like it should be applied to, kind of nitpicking each one, saying, you can do this, they're not doing that one, don't like this idea, and kept pushing them up and down and kind of passing them around. Then he did say something closer to the end where he states that further, the college recognizes the right of petitions for the purpose of expressing a request and/or a point of view. However, because of its commitment as an academic institution to the concept of reason and rational discussion, the college cannot entertain matters presented under the veil of threat, either implicit or explicit. Threat. That's the reason why they said no to it, because they thought that the students were threatening them based off of this rumor that was spread around by the other students. This idea that they were gonna bomb the campus and then push this idea and this agenda through, that basically because of this exact reason that we don't even know for sure, but because of this reason, this is why we're gonna reject most of these things. Now, back then, these were things that were very important to the students, the support system. But I can say now today, we have made a little bit of leeway with it, as we have Mosaic Scholars, where now Black students and students of color are getting scholarship money. We do have support systems now for students of color, as well as the Ubuntu Mentorship Program now provides this for the students. So things that a lot of these students wish they needed back in the day, we now give to some of the students not here. So we have came a long way. There is still work that does need to be done, but again, the spectrum still kind of goes up and down, and it's very hard to sit here to just say that this institution as a whole is racist, but it does show that they do not offer a lot of support, and not often is it shown that they are very welcoming here. And so, with that just being said, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to have anything to voice, we're here to respond.
So, from one of the early interviews, it was said that when they were first trying to start a Black student union, or it was considered exclusionary for a Black student union to start. And that's like a common argument to shut down advancement groups. So what do you think is a good counter argument in favor of endorsing advancement groups such as that? Is it okay, we'll let white people in? Is it the idea that it's for education, it's promoting solidarity? Like, what do you think is a good way to counter that argument?
Honestly, I think the best way to say that is that it's a way to interact with students of color. Because the thing is that these groups, they don't feel safe on campuses, so that's why they create these safe spaces for them. And so with these safe spaces, they need to be able to express themselves, and that's why they kind of construct them. Now, most of the time they have to say this for education purposes, so they will allow them to kind of pass through, but when you are interacting, then you become educated. So therefore, the way that they have to state it is that these spaces are safe for the students there of color, and white students are welcome to come into these spaces, because the fact that through those interactions, they will learn new things and the points of views of these students of color. And so it's hard to combat it, because sometimes when you're offering up to these people who are in the administration, right, they already have their kind of pre-mindset on it. So the times that they have to present it, it has to be presented as it's for education purposes. You have to kind of add some of those things. But I think that the most important understanding for the purpose of these groups are the importance to be able to interact with students, more students of color, and also white students, because they'll be able to see them in an actual comfortable space, because when they are operating within the campus community, they tend to shut themselves off because they don't think that they're going to be actually accepted by other students, so they kind of hide themselves. Thank you. Any other questions? That's okay.
Where do you think you can see more on campus? Sorry, I don't know if that's a bad question to ask, but I don't know.
Nah, you're good. Where do I think I can see more improvement? Sorry, question. I definitely would say that having more people come to some of the clubs and stuff like that, just because we do have them now, and that is a necessary purpose to be able to interact more. And we have the clubs, but you don't often see many people kind of come out to them. So it's like they are missing a lot of opportunities to like learn new things, be able to interact with students of color. Because some of the stuff that still happened back in the day still happens now, where some of the students of color, they just stick to themselves and they don't stick and like branch out to talk to other white students. So it's like, and it's not even, it's just, so it comes to be a little bit difficult when it's like we're coming here to try to integrate, meet new people, have new experiences, but then we have these clubs that are set up for these things, but people aren't coming to them. So I definitely think that but this comes down to the students, it doesn't really come down to the faculty or administration, because if we have these things here and students are choosing not to interact with them, it is on the students to be able to come out and to join these groups and then to see what we're about and then to learn more. So I think like it could be definitely a better thing, because a lot of these students who went through some of their stuff, the reasons why that they got a lot of the things that they got done is because of the fact that they had white students there to support them, because with the white students being the majority, they did need a lot more numbers with them to be able to push these things. So they ate in demand. They did get a lot more supporters, and a lot of them had a lot of white students in these groups helping them come up against administration. It's including as well with the noir group, as they had a lot of white students who were part of it. So the thing is like they had a couple of them who were dedicated, and that gave them that support system, that gave them that safety, and that was able to have people participating, people joining. So that's what I think.
I might add something too on that. So one thing that I found interesting as Kalen did his research in the newspapers and Jordyn did her research on all these various groups is that, so Aaron Blanding talks about starting a Black Student Union during his time here. That was something that had, it seems like every few decades the students are forced to kind of like start these groups from scratch all over again, and because it is really student run in a lot of cases and they really need that like staff support that isn't necessarily always consistent. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting talking about just like including the whole campus is the very first Black Student Union, which started in the 70s, started with a Black Culture Weekend. So they immediately thought about it in terms of how can we introduce other people to our culture. So it was very inclusive from the very beginning. And then just like Aaron Blanding talk about like holding dances, doing events where they're really truly. I was amazed like how much it was always like bringing students in. Did you find that too, guys?
Yeah. I did see that a lot actually, because they had the Black weekends almost like it was like a regular tradition of the school actually. So I did see that in the campus, because they would talk about what they would do. They'd bring people onto the campus to like speak about Black culture. They did this like almost like sometimes they even had it as like a week-long thing, and it wasn't just something that was simply for Black History Month. They had it like sometimes multiple times throughout the year. So they did have a lot of things. I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I mean it's been sort of answered so far, but within your research, where did you see like improvements begin to come up, and like how did it begin to come up in terms of like support for these students and everything like that? Like was it more or less like, as faculty left, newer faculty came in with more progressive mindsets, or just like mandates coming down from overhead? Like how were these reforms pushed through essentially?
So like how necessarily I didn't fully see that, because what I saw was my experiences here taught me that there were improvements. So, because like I didn't get further into it like completely yet, but like so there's certain things that some of these people who were expressing that they thought was important for them, they didn't see that often there. Like the Black Student Unions, of the fact that I think it was around like, because here's the thing, it was that there were some improvements during those periods of time, but then they would kind of disappear. There were improvements, they would disappear. So like the thing that you talked about, that Black weekend, so that Black weekend, that was a big thing for that campus, because in an area where it was like you don't often see that there's a lot of support for these Black students, that they're hosting weekends, and there were people who were showing up to them, and the campus, like the actual college was even promoting it as well. That is an improvement right there, just even showing their mindset towards the Black students. But sometimes it would disappear, and then when it's gone, it's gone. So there's not anybody else to really kind of like show that and kind of give that up. But then, as I said, like nowadays, what we see here, as I said, like the Ubuntu mentorship program, that was their support system now. So it's like I was able to see, like, kind of put those pieces together. That yes, there were improvements, and this is how I kind of saw them. Especially with having students of color attending this school now. Yeah. Sorry, I saw you in the back there.
Are either of you aware of any recent, just say the last couple of years, any recent incidents in town towards students of color? Like negative incidents, harms or anything like that? I just want to know what's happening now.
Yeah, actually I did hear one not too long ago. Apparently one of the students went into a store and they saw like a massive Confederate flag in like the back of the store. So that was like probably the most recent one I've heard. I haven't heard anything else, but yeah.
Was that in the past 5 years?
Yeah, I think it was last year actually. Yeah.
I had a question for Jordyn actually about what she was looking at. So it took Etown over 100 years to hire a woman of color as faculty. Do you think there is a specific reason why that intersection specifically took so long to make advancement in? Is it that the Etown community or like the wider community was just less welcoming, like less safe for that kind of person, or something else, just based on your research at least?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. I think it was definitely like a variety of factors. I think as we've seen like from our research, Etown wasn't super welcoming to people of color as a whole. So it may have been that maybe people didn't feel comfortable working in this environment, but they might not have actively been looking for like more diverse hires. So it could have been a lot of things, but she did eventually come here, but it shocked me that it took 100 years to have a female faculty member of color. So definitely a lot of those factors that we kind of discussed at play intersecting.
I have something to add on that real quick. But yeah, so another thing too as well, kind of just to off of that, is that the fact that when people of color came onto the campus, if like some of the faculty needed places to stay, they were not allowed to stay in the town. So that was like an understanding with them. So like if they even brought performers, like the people who brought the performers onto the campus, the faculty would have to keep them in their house, because if they rented some things, like there were certain understandings that black people were not allowed to rent places there. So it was like that was just an understood thing that was within that community. So that was another reason why some people weren't like coming to the school to be able to work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have the demands been like reviewed, and could they be applied like now since so much time has passed?
So that's what I was kind of touching upon when I said like something kind of came a little bit over a long way, because they did ask for some money for black students, and so like as I said, like the Mosaic Scholar, like Darcy is a part of, that does give us some of those demands that kind of came forward. Some of them were situational due to that time period, like they were asking for things that were specifically applied towards the 90s, but like for now, like that, yeah, some of them, yeah, but like the stuff that were like towards like the money aspect, some of those things are now actually kind of like into play. Like the support system, like the Ubuntu mentorship program, that thing is into play now. So it's like some of the demands were able to be met. Yeah. Any other questions?
I was just gonna ask for both of you guys, what was one thing in like creating and reviewing these historical archives and like creating living archives as well, what was something that came up for you that was like you could pull out that kind of synthesized or characterized that experience?
I have to think about it.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I think I have to say the Black Weekend thing, because that really surprised me. It's just because like we don't even do that now, but it was like during that time period where they're sitting down there in the 90s, where like there is a lot of racism that's active, that they're sitting down there doing weekends and even weeks straight of like activities for black students and to teach like the wider Elizabethtown community about these things. Like that to me, I just didn't think that would be something that they would do, because at the same time you're still dealing with racial issues at this campus. Like a lot of these things that David Jackson spoke about was during those times when they still have a Black Weekend. So it was like the fact that they're sitting down here, like they have some instances where like they're just ignorant, they don't really care about the black students, but there are other instances where they do, because they're allowing these Black Weekends to come through, because they did have activists come through and actually speak on the campus too as well. So that's even like a major thing as well, because like the fact that they were even thinking that they would bring civil rights activists onto the campus to speak, especially knowing that the outside community would not appreciate any of that, kind of showed a lot. So it was just like those little things kind of showed me that, like, I wouldn't sit down here and say that Etown as a whole was racist, because they still did things that supported students of color, and that was like one of those things that kind of showed me that. So it was like my mind wasn't fully tainted by some of the stories that were here, because it was like these were people's experiences, but it doesn't encompass the whole entire school. Yeah.
So for me, it was definitely learning about the past people of color here in Etown. So I did a lot of research on like the earlier students, and it was so interesting to learn about them, because like you never hear about that sort of thing, and just learning about their time here and what they went on to do and accomplish was so powerful, really. Like, these people went on to do such great things, and it was really a powerful moment. And also, I did the transcription work for the oral history interviews that we saw here, and wow, just getting to listen to those people's stories and like their lived experiences, I think it's been some of the most like impactful work I've ever got to partake in. Yeah, just hearing like what those people went through, those were people's lives and what their lived experiences, and it's really living history. And I think living history is a really powerful educational tool. And I think we should be promoting more of that. So this work, I think people should be exposed to this and listen to these people's lives and their experiences, because it really teaches us. It teaches us in the present.
Any other questions?
I noticed a lot of the faculty members you mentioned were in like sociology or like social sciences. So I was kind of curious what you thought is that what the students of color were studying as well? Like generally what were they studying on campus?
Yeah, so that's interesting to point out, because a lot of the students of color who were going here were studying like the social sciences and the humanities. A lot of those early graduates that I had mentioned, they came here for like religious degrees. A lot of them worked in theology, history, education, sociology, things like that. So there was definitely like a correlation based on the research we did with that.
So Kalen and I just did another interview last week with a man named Charles Mock, who graduated in 1975. He actually overlapped with David Jackson and knew him. And he said that he very specifically chose Elizabethtown because he wanted to be a minister, and he was looking for somewhere that had a strong like religious studies program. And he actually talked about how interesting it was for him as someone who was very knowledgeable about theology, and particularly like within the Black church, and then like the intersection of that with people who were much more knowledgeable in the Church of the Brethren. And I feel like there's a lot more to like explore in that, and like that intersection of their belief systems and how that would work together. So yeah.
Kind of just adding off of that too as well. Some of the students that were like, most of the international students were actually coming for like the theology purposes, because the Mennonites did have a connection like in Nigeria and a lot of places in Africa, but they would bring their students over. So the international students were actually some of them sometimes predominantly just doing this for like religious reasons. Yeah. You got a question?
Yes, I was wondering as far as if you had did a comparison to the religious background of the college, Church of the Brethren, and how that coordinated with accepting or including African American or persons of color onto the campus, because the Church of the Brethren during the decades that you were doing was very conservative. And when you said about 100 years till you get a female faculty of color, my first question is, when did the first female faculty of color come on campus? White, Black, Asian, etc. And as far as females on campus as students relatively early in the college, at the turn of the century. But again, it was primarily a male-dominated world, a male-dominated church, a white-dominated, European-centric church that is the foundation of this college and its religious connection. And I think that, comparing what some of your interviewees said about how they felt on campus, I think that, I don't want to give justification, but I think there's something about, at the time, it wasn't on their radar screen. They didn't know. It wasn't even something they possibly even think about, that certain people needed support. I don't know. But I think there's a lot to be said about comparing your research and what your interviewees experienced to what was the mindset on the campus as far as where the background was from. Church of the Brethren, conservative, male-dominated, European-centric.
Thank you for the question.
Well, I don't know that it was a question.
Yeah, I saw it was part of the question. But for that beginning half part, during that period of time, because from what I did research, I don't think that there was I think it was maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 black students. So yeah, to what you said, that did stand by for that period. But when the periods changed, because there was a period of time the brethren were no longer the central point within the Elizabethtown community, then you start to see that as students of color come in, there were issues. And the thing is that they were talking to the faculty and the staff about it, as you've seen with the President Morley J. May's thing, where he specifically is responding back to these things. Because later on he asserts that he believes that it's imperative that this institution as a whole is there to go against racism and whatnot. So they did have understandings of how these students of color were being treated. It was just whether or not they were gonna do something about it, because there was, I guess you would also say with that kind of conservative leaning idea, is that they had to kind of juggle multiple things. Because with their mass population that was there, they also had to please the white students. So if they did things to the black students, they might have thought that it was possible that the white students could leave the school, maybe revolt against that fact. So it was there was things that I would assume that it wasn't just a fact. I don't think that they didn't know. They just had to kind of juggle politics with these things, because when you do a look towards one single group and then you push everything towards money and all this type of stuff, the other students might feel that they're getting neglected. So I think that it kind of, at that period of time, their priorities were kind of that this is more important at this instance, so we're gonna focus here and not as much focus towards the students of color. That's the way I would have viewed it. But yeah, I don't know if you wanna say anything else.
I will answer just specifically the question about women. We did have a female faculty member at the very beginning in 1900 when we started. They were never a huge part of the faculty population early on, but we did have female faculty members. Yeah.
Did you have anything else you want? Any other questions?
I did also want to point out, and maybe you're already aware of this, so we did mention the Church of the Brethren Racial Justice Working Group, which is some members of that group are here tonight. They are looking very specifically at particularly those presidents of the college who were also ministers in the Church of the Brethren, and what they were writing about, what they were preaching about. So there is research going on that topic, but I would say it's more centered with the Church of the Brethren group that's doing related work, and we talk with them frequently, but this has been more focused on the college very specifically.
Anything else, guys? Any questions? Yeah.
Okay, so we also wanted to share, Kalen had the idea to include a QR code. So we do have, most of the interviews are online, so you can listen to the full interviews and read transcripts, and then we're slowly adding profiles of all of the faculty and students that Jordyn has researched. Eventually we'd like to add just the full text of the Idea Lab exhibit to this website. It's just going to continue to be a place where we'll add more research as it becomes available.
Hey, just a quick question, looking at the early black students coming in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and the one gentleman who was a social worker. I had the opportunity to talk to people today and saying, how could there be black students at Etown College during that period when it was a sundowner town, there were no blacks allowed in to be overnight in Etown. You said people would take them in, and we've heard a lot of stories about this, but Benowitz told me that that guy, and the social work guy in the picture, I forget his name, he said, you know, he was from Middletown and he was a commuter student.
They were all,
And I didn't know that.
All of those early
That's
students.
new information. So they were all commuter students because they could not stay in here because blacks were not allowed overnight. They couldn't buy houses. They couldn't be buried at Tunnel Cemetery, and there's a whole thing about that. It goes right back to the covenants of the township.
Yes, that's
Or
an
the
excellent.
borough.
Paul Rice did say in his interview that when he was here in the 50s, there were black students in the dorm, but they couldn't go out and get a haircut. They couldn't be out in.
Couldn't be in town. Yeah, as you
And
were saying.
and their parents couldn't stay overnight. If they
Right.
came to visit, they had to go to Hershey or somewhere.
Yes.
Stay overnight.
Yes, most of those early students that we mentioned, they did not live on campus. They were commuter students. They lived in Harrisburg, Middletown, places like that, because they were not allowed to stay on campus because of the fact that Etown was a sundown town, and they didn't allow black people to stay overnight. So they were forced to commute, essentially.
Yeah, what you mentioned about the 50s seems like that's when things started to change, at least with the students on campus. There's a few students in that time period that I found in our research that did live in the dorms. But yeah, those very early students, they were commuting from Middletown, from Harrisburg, other towns nearby.
Because I think those covenants from the borough didn't really change until after the war, late 40s, if I remember from the Historic Society. We talked about it.
Yeah, because another thing too as well was that almost all the international students, the ones that I mentioned that were coming from like Nigeria, were also all commuting, because the thing is that they were all adults, like they were in like their 40s and 50s, so they had families, they had like wives and kids, so they weren't really gonna stay on like the dorms at all. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Good.
Any other questions?
Thank you for your research. This has
No
been
problem.
fascinating. Good job. That was really
So Kalen is continuing to do interviews, so if you know anyone who would be interested, we are primarily interviewing alumni of color, but we did do an interview with one white student who had graduated in 1955. Just if they have memories that are helpful, we definitely want to talk to them, but particularly students of color, if you or alumni of color, if you have people you know are interested, we really do want to chat with them. So thank you very much, everyone.